So that leads me into kind of I like three exercises that are way too easy to just tell people to do as part of something. So I like to call them bathroom exercises, because I do these three every time, and I tell my patients to do these three every time you're in the bathroom, sitting down. So those three, the first one's going to be a little scap squeeze, where you're just squeezing your shoulder blades back, right? So I go back, and then I drive them down. Seconds back, drive them down, right? You're sitting in the bathroom right now.
Yep.
The other one is a chin tuck. Just that little drive back, if you could see, of my chin. And I'll just do like 10 of each of those while I'm in the bathroom.
Right.
So the last one, you talked about the foot with Will the other day a little bit. So I like to throw in just, again, for overall posture, for foot health. And it's another one that you're just never going to do on its own. So what I like to do is, I'll show you the other bathroom exercise I has, is just kind of like building up the arch.
Yes.
So, or foot push-up, we'll call it, right? So where you try to drive that big toe into the ground.
Yep.
And build that arch up under your foot.
Yep.
So you're pushing down into the floor, building up your foot. The bathroom exercise, the bathroom three.
That's good.
I tell them every single one of my patients, because they're too light for people to continually do in something. They're usually the forgotten exercises.
Right.
So it's easy enough just to do 10 of them while you're sitting there.
Right.
So I like to do that. So that was the first thing that we talked about, was kind of combating that slump that we do all day.
Right.
And trying to open up pecs, get some extension from your upper back. The other main concepts that you want to think about with shoulder health are, we talked about stretching the pec. The other main muscle that's going to restrict you overhead is your lats. So how do we stretch the lats? Because nobody does. I sure don't. So you've seen some people just kind of like to come here and stretch in this way, where you're hanging on to something. I'm on the top of the chair here, and I'm just sitting back, getting all of this stretched underneath. But I'm going to show you one of my favorite stretches, if you can do it. I'm just going to run and grab a little Swiffer. So it is I'm using a Swiffer. You guys have what you clean with, but I like to take it here. I'm going to go onto the chair. Now we got underhanded grip.
Yep.
Palm facing you. And I'm just scooting myself back, if you can see this, right? Scooting myself and then driving down into it.
That hurts, man.
Holding. Yeah, it's a tough stretch.
Yeah.
And I would start with this, with just kind of leaning back, letting all of this stretch here. But this is one of the best lat stretches that you can have. It goes a long way to free up some overhead range of motion.
Nice.
So we had pec, and we can talk about the main pec stretch is in the door, right?
Right.
So I'm not a big, but here's what I'll show you with that. Some people love this stretch here, where you're just either in a doorway or on something and you're kind of leaning into it.
Right.
So just to change that a little bit, you shouldn't be just kind of driving into the front of your shoulder. Now, if most people have this kind of a little bit of a rounded posture anyway,
right,
when you're here, sometimes that's a strain as it is, and then you're driving into a forward shoulder. So to change that a little bit, what you should do, instead of driving forward, I usually tell people to turn away so that you feel like you're just pulling this muscle this way. So once you're here, once you get into this position, start turning.
Oh, okay.
Until you feel you want to drag that muscle. It should be more of a drag so that you get a stretch, as opposed to kind of just beating up the front of your shoulder.
Interesting.
Because you're putting a lot of strain on the front of your capsule when you lean in that much. It should be a turn away. so that you're dragging that muscle.
Gotcha.
So a lot of times to be honest with you, I don't even give people that exercise because I feel like it's just goes the wrong way a lot of times. I'll stick with more of the foam roller stretch. I love that foam roller stretch.
They're going to fall that way anyway. It's going to drop. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm there, I'll do it a little bit, and I think that their pecs really, really tight. I'll do it with them a little bit, but I don't like just sending somebody off with that because they end up leaning in, and it's just not a good. You're just stretching out some of the tissue in the front there of the joint space. It's just not. It's not the greatest if you're not doing it right.
Right. You're not actually getting the pec.
Right. So, and other methods for working on. So the main concept here is that the two main things that are tight are your pec and your lats that we could work on effectively. So I showed you some stretches. You can still use, the lacrosse ball, the golf ball to get in and just kind of lay on it, to kind of do some self releases. You can use the foam roller on your lats, right? Just rolling up and down the side, right under your armpit here, to kind of help and hitting those tight spots like we talked about with the leg to help loosen that as well. But the stretches are a good place to start, I think.
Right.
So now the other kind of half of this is rotator cuff strength. So we talked about that the rotator cuff needs to be strong and worked effectively in order to kind of hold your shoulder stability while you're going overhead, hold in the right position so that you're not kind of slipping off of that golf ball and maybe impinging upon other things that are causing that pain right in the front of your shoulder.
Right.
So there's so many ways as physical therapists that we treat that. With some dynamic. So there's a million exercises for dynamic stability that we do hands-on with the person. But for the sake of this talk, we can definitely do some easy rotator cuff strengthening that is effective and can kind of help the muscles, especially the ones that are weak because of posture. Okay. Because that's what we're talking about. So take another break. Let me get the first thing as far as, and you hit on this the last, I think it was yesterday's workout. I forgot if it was yesterday's or Monday's, but I remember saying to myself that was a good hit. I forgot what we were doing. Maybe it was shoulder taps on the plank. Yeah. Or it actually, I think it actually was bird dog. So what's important not to forget is that down arm when you're doing motions with the other arm or the other leg or doing the taps, that is just as important an exercise, that hold, that push and that hold on that side, even though you're tapping with the other arm, right? That's a huge stabilization exercise for your rotator cuff, is being able to push and hold that proper position. So not letting it yourself just kind of fall as you're doing that tap and go to the next one and fall. That's huge right there in rotator cuff health and stability. So we call that closed chain, right? Where you're kind of grounded. So the big exercises, and the ones that you already hit on, is the bent over row is a great exercise for kind of scapular strengthening and really postural, and really going to help the rotator cuff. So the ones that I like, just nice and easy to throw in, whereas one, if you have a band of any kind, just doing external rotation here, right? We call this external rotation when you're rotating out. I like the underhanded grip here, and I like to squeeze my shoulder blades together as I do it. So this is a good way to just isolate the external rotators of your shoulder and keep them strong. So when you're not just trying to bend or rip the band, you're also thinking about the back, the wings, trying to squeeze them together. Yep. You're thinking about those wings, squeezing the wings together as you kind of pull apart the band. And we do pull aparts at Crankle. We used to when we were there. Right. Right. But this is kind of more elbow bent to that 90 degrees as you do it.
Yeah.
You just rotate apart, right?
Gotcha.
So the other one is just a dumbbell. We do a lot of dumbbell overhead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a great one to kind of isolate another rotator cuff muscle is going into that 45 degrees. And I think this is what she meant by 45 degrees when she went overhead.
Yeah.
Right? You would think she meant off of center, right? So if she was going overhead this way.
No, meaning like when she's here, she can't, like, she's the picture. She is pretty much stuck here.
Yeah. So that's actually a perfect example. So she is probably more of that person that's a little stiffer throughout her upper back.
Right.
And kind of wouldn't be able to come here, because now you're going into some real hyperextension. If you're this way, when you go overhead, this is straight overhead. If you try to get here, now you're talking about getting into some real hyperextension of your shoulder where it's not used to working.
Right.
And that's a big strain on your rotator cuff, a big stretch on your bicep. And it's a lot of strain. It's putting those muscles at a disadvantage. So that's what we're talking about, right? Is avoiding those things that cause the big disadvantages that can lead to injury. We see that a lot in actually CrossFit, right? Because CrossFit does a lot of overhead holds and stability, like holds while they're walking and with heavy weight.
Right.
And a lot of these people that are doing it are really stiff through their thoracic spine because they're doing these just heavyweight Olympic dynamic things over and over, and they're getting their stability from their upper back, and they're really flexed forward. But then one of the things that they do is try to get here, and like they'll do a walking lunge with huge barbell weight overhead,
right,
in that position where they're forward and they're trying to get their stability all the way back here. So we see a lot of injury from that to the labrum, a lot of injury from that to the bicep. And that's a thing that could be corrected with posture and some stability overhead.
Right.
So going back to that other is just the raise. We're going just to shoulder level, and we're not straight and we're not all the way to the side. We're right in that middle. So in that 45 degree to the side. And that's going to isolate one of your rotator cuff muscles. So that's a good one. Again, we're thinking about taking a step back and just isolating some of the muscles.
Right.
Whether it's through a warm-up or whether it's something you say before I go overhead.
Right. If
that part of the crank workout is here and it's giving me pain, maybe I'm going to take a step back for a few weeks and just do this.
Right.
Right. And just do the scaption because it's in that 45 degree plane. Right. Instead of being straight. And you're just going to shoulder level. So take a step back and strengthen the shoulder that way.
Right.
The other one that's easy if you don't have a band to work on that external rotation is we take face towel, roll it up, put it under your armpit, and we're going to go to laying on the side. So I'm going to go on the other table here. On your side, small dumbbell, and you're just rotating up here.
The one that everyone sees.
That everyone sees in physical therapy.
I feel like that's the physical therapy exercise of life.
Right.
Right.
So
every time you go to a physical therapy office, like someone is doing that exercise.
Someone's doing it. Yeah. So, and again, there's a lot more. Those are the basics, man. That raise there,
right.
This external rotation,
right.
Prone row on your stomach, which we do all the time with bent over row. So I'm not going to show that. Right. Maybe a little bit more of like a wing when you're on your stomach,
right.
Coming here. Those are the basics because they're working on rotator cuff strength and they're working on shoulder blade strength.
Right.
So to help kind of with posture.
Right.
So the things that are important when you think about upper back extension and regaining that because of our posture.
Right.
Forward head is a big one that goes with that. As you lean forward, your head goes forward too as we're looking at phones. So kind of combating that, trying to get back upright. And the only way you're going to do that, you can't just sit upright all day because most people will just get that by arching, right?
Right.
Arching their low back. So what you want to do is work on thoracic extension, work on loosening up your pecs, loosening up your lats, strengthening your rotator cuff muscle so that it can hold you properly, ball on the tee, so that it holds you properly. So I think those were kind of like the easy things to do. Foam roller goes a long way. Stretch your pecs, stretch your lats.
Yeah.
Work on rotator cuff strength a little bit.
Easy.
So again, I don't know if that specific case might have been coming from the neck,
Right.
but if it is, you're kind of treating the neck with that anyway, because your neck again is the same thing: posture,
Right.
forward head, working on the deep muscles of the neck, doing some chin tucks. So posture is a lot of things that is one of the main things that causes impingement at the shoulder, and can also cause some pain from your neck traveling down into your arm, making your shoulder weak.
Right.